Welcome to our MBN Academy webinar, City Planning and Neighborhood 101. We are glad to have you. I am Jim Herbst, Programs Manager in the City of Norfolk's Department of Neighborhood Development. As background to this evening's webinar, one of our neighborhood development specialists had some questions about planning that had come up with some neighborhoods that she was working with, and so we asked Paula Shea if she could give a presentation internally to our team. Paula did such a terrific job. Her reward was to be asked to do it all over again for the public, and so here we are this evening. Paula gave a great presentation on the Department of Planning and its various divisions and how they interact with neighborhoods. We thought that information was so valuable that it was worth sharing with the public. A few housekeeping items for your attention. First, this session is being recorded to post on the internet at a later time. Second, we welcome questions. There should be a Q&A panel available for you to send us questions. We will do our best to answer them during or at the end of the presentation. If they relate to the topic at hand, and place interrupt questions as I can. Everyone but presenters is currently muted. At the end, I'll unmute everyone for the remaining questions or all of these who can't take questions. We want neighbors to interact and work with each other, so we open the chat and participant panel so that you can see and say hi to your neighbors. Ask that attendees be respectful in the chat and generally keep your comments positive and not critical of others. Fourth, at the conclusion of today's webinar, we ask your assistance before you leave in filling out our MBN Academy evaluation, which will be posted in the poll panel. Now, let's get to those trivia questions. Paula, I don't know if you want me to go through them or if you want to go through them.
Wait. Hi, everybody. Why don't you go through them, Jim? I answered them, but I didn't submit, so I hope I get them right. So go right ahead. Yep.
Okay. Well, I'll go to question number one. The general, sorry to put you on the spot like that, but the question number one, the general plan called in Norfolk 2030. The Second Planning Commission has 7 members. The third question helps guide all of it. It helps economic development, environmental improvement, transit, all of those things that were listed. Long-range planning helps with all of those things. The fourth question, the following boards and commissions are open to the public input, except the answer there is site plan review. The Architectural Review Board, the City Planning Commission, and City Council are open to public input. Site plan review is an internal review of engineers and others that Paula will get to in her presentation. Fifthly, the zoning ordinance is required by state code. That is also true. So enough with the trivia. I'll close the poll in a second, but I'll pass this over to Paula. I want to thank Paula for doing this evening. I've worked with Paula for about 10 years. She is great to work with. I knew nothing about planning when I started with the city with me and other about planning and zoning. To this evening, and I'll pass this.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Jim. Jim was sharing he hadn't had any problems with his internet connection until the past 10 days, and it's been going in and out, so his voice was a little garbled. So I'm hoping mine is better. I have Verizon, so we'll test our different systems tonight. So. I just got a pop-up. Oh, sorry. So again, my name is Paula Shea. I am the Assistant Director of the Department of City Planning. But a little background, I actually started with the city as a neighborhood planner. That was my very first task, and the very first neighborhood I started working in back in, I'll give the year, 1989. Okay, pause. Everybody can do the math. Was Park Place. And Park Place was just a fantastic neighborhood, but it was not the up-and-coming neighborhood that it is today. There were a lot of challenges, and I really kind of cut my teeth on that neighborhood. I learned a lot about working with the community, and it's what I had always wanted to do and was happy to be doing it. But over the years, I have worked in all the different areas of planning, and I'm going to spend some time with you tonight just walking you through, what planning does and how we work with neighborhoods and how neighborhood development is such an integral part of what we do too. So, thank you. So I just thought I'd start with the basics of just an org chart of the planning department. We're the Department of City Planning, and we have basically 5 functions that we cover, and I'm going to walk through each one, beginning with what we're just going to call planning. Now, planning is the planning function within planning is long-range planning, and I'm going to talk to you about that. That's where we set the goals and the visions for our areas in the city. There is zoning, which I don't think there's a neighborhood out there that doesn't know what zoning is and hasn't encountered and said probably some bad things about zoning. So we'll go through a little bit of zoning. We also cover historic preservation, floodplain management, and that's becoming more and more important in the city of Norfolk, as we all know. We see more water, and so different ways of dealing with water and to protect property. And then finally, site plan review is within the general planning functions. The next area we call is building safety, and these are our inspectors. And it gets a little confusing. So, we have inspectors, the Department of Neighborhood Development has inspectors, the Health Department has inspectors, heck, Public Works has inspectors. So what do planning inspectors do? Planning department inspectors, they do inspections related to permits. So, for example, if you're building a house and you pull a building permit, our inspectors from building safety are the ones who would come out to inspect the framing and the plumbing and the electrical, mechanical. Those types of inspections are all done within planning. Now, on the other hand, if you have tall weeds and grass or a porch is falling off a house, that's the inspectors in neighborhood development and sometimes environmental. The third area in planning is the Development Services Center. This is, if we were still open and sitting in City Hall, this is that first floor, kind of a public-facing counters where you can actually walk in and get your permits, your electrical, if you're replacing a hot water heater or building a new house or building a shopping center. They issue the permits and do development review related to those permits. Right now, it is all done online, and we have learned a lot of process improvements through COVID, and I dare say that there will be lots of applicants that will never come back to City Hall. They can do everything electronically. We cover environmental services, things like wetlands, erosion and sediment control. That, for your information, is when there's new construction going on and you see those orange fences around the outside of the property, that's to keep the silt from running off if it rains into our storm drains. And so they're in charge of inspecting that to make sure that construction sites are not letting things leak into the storm drains, for example. They also go out and do inspections. They oversee the dunes and the protection of the dunes. And I should say they do a little bit they do stuff with trees too. Our recreation department does stuff with trees, but so does our environmental services. And then finally, I won't run through this, we have an administrative services, and they're the people who keep us going. So I never want to leave them out. They are an essential part of our planning function. So just to give an overview of the planning process, because all these different areas I just covered are all part of the flow of going through a planning process. And when you think about a planning process, this could apply to anything you do, and you're planning out how are you going to have a Thanksgiving dinner this year? Well, you mentally and physically go through a planning process. So for a piece of property in the city of Norfolk, there's different elements that go into the planning process. You begin with the long-range planning. What is your vision for that piece of property or that neighborhood or the city as a whole? What is it you want to do? And then the next question comes the zoning and the environmental people. Well, what are you allowed to do? What are the regulations you have to comply to do to do that? Then the third area is you go and you ask permission. You get permits to do it. I'm asking permission to do this. I get my permits. And then the final step in the planning process was getting those inspections where we check up and say, did you do it correctly what you said? So to break it down, before we get into the processes, a lot of times we get asked a question, why do we do planning? Why plan for something? And you know, if everything in life were static, we would never have to have a plan, but lots of things change, and communities and neighborhoods are no different. We have a lot of factors that influence our neighborhoods and communities where, you know, we're part of a global economy. Military Circle Mall is a good example, or all the empty storefronts. You know, at one point, even set aside COVID, people used to shop in person, but online shopping became a real factor, and that really weakened the ability for malls to survive. And then COVID came along and just went ahead and killed them. You know, so we need to reimagine the use of retail space and try to figure out how much retail space do we need. Well, what should happen with Military Circle Mall, for example? We have climate change. We talk about that. We have a lot more water to deal with. It falls from the sky 4 inches in an hour. You know, everything floods. But we're seeing incidents like that more and more. So we need to plan for how we're going to adjust. Aging facilities. Buildings get older. Some last, but some don't. So we need a plan for how we see our buildings transitioning over time. And then finally, it's not just the buildings that are aging, it's us. And people make different lifestyle choices as they go through their own lifespan, and so we need to adjust for that. And planning allows us to prepare for these changes. So to jump right in, what I like to think of as the very first phase of planning are those long-range plans where you set the vision for what you want to do with either a single piece of property, the whole way up to the entire city. What do you want? What's the vision for the city? And so long-range planning can cover everything from our comprehensive plan, which is Plan Norfolk 2030, and we'll come back to that, to an area plan. We did a plan for the Military Circle area and Military Highway. We did an area plan. And then we also have done an individual type plan for what used to be the Greenie site. I think we gave it a different name in the process, but one thing that all three of these plans had in common is they started with the community input, and it involved going back to the community to get more feedback. So long-range planning is all about working with the community and getting their input. This is, to me, the most important part of community input is during the long-range planning process. So the city has a comprehensive plan, Plan Norfolk 2030, and it provides the vision for, you know, where do we want to go, and then it provides the roadmap for how are we going to get there. The plan, you know, it's full of all kinds of words and maps, but at the end of the plan is an implementation matrix that gives assignments and timelines and things that have to happen for the vision to be realized. So Plan Norfolk 2030 is Norfolk's comprehensive plan. It was adopted by City Council in 2013. It replaced the prior plan from 1992. So taking on a comprehensive plan is not, you know, it is a intensive process. It's not something we take lightly when we redo a plan. And the fact that it has a 20-year horizon and we look out about 20 years when we do a plan like this means it should last a while. It's going to take a while to realize that plan. And something key to keep in mind when you're doing a comprehensive plan is you always keep the implementation in mind, because the last thing you want to do is write a plan, which I have to say the 1992 plan kind of suffered from this, where you write it and then it sits on the shelf and it's not ever referred to and referenced. It's not embraced by the community as their plan and something we want to work towards. So my son is coming to visit me. Excuse me. So I wanted to give you an example of a planning process to kind of walk you through to really see how involved we have the community in this process. And I want to use the Military Circle Military Highway plan that was done. This was adopted in 2017. It's a very recent plan, but we are in the throes of implementing it with our Department of Development. So all planning processes, all good planning processes begin with kind of looking at the background material. You know, what have we studied before in this area? What has happened out there? What's going to happen out there? What are the demographic trends for this area? And then, especially in Norfolk, things like what flood zone is this in? What's the future look like for this parcel? And an interesting little fact about the Military Circle Military Highway Plan is that's our spine of high ground in the city of Norfolk. And the more we work, the more we see that as, wow, this could be our transformative area for the future of Norfolk. This is where we should be investing resources on creating that community that's going to last. And then another background factor in the military highway and military circle areas, we knew light rail there was going to be a study, this was back in 2017, to expand light rail, to get to the naval base in some way, shape, or form. And we by that time knew that an eastern route was what the city was going to be studying. So we wanted to get ahead of that with an area plan and say, let's get a plan in place that embraces transit really being available to serve the area and what a plan would look like. So we took all that background information and we met with the community. We had a huge meeting at Calvary Revival Church. We had 150 plus attendees. It was a fabulous meeting, but heard all kinds of things from the community, heard lots. But another interesting tidbit about Military Circle, it's easier to plan for something that everybody dislikes and wants to see transition to something else or change. So this was, in fact, an easy planning process. We didn't have anybody talk about, you know, it's a great place and why are we talking about it. Everybody knew we needed to address the area. So we take all that information we hear from the public and we put our heads together and we come up with some alternatives. In this case, we looked at some alternatives. If light rail were to be expanded and transit, you know, really enhanced in this area, what are our options? And we looked at some different alternatives. I think we looked at 6 originally, and we narrowed it down and we said, you know, one of the goals we heard from the community clearly was we need to do a better job of linking up our assets. You should be able to move easily from one area to another in Norfolk. And we kind of took that to heart. And so we ended up recommending an alternative when we worked with the community that was able to link Janif to Military Circle the whole way over to Sahara Lee and really create a corridor there. So we took those alternatives back to the community again and to develop a consensus. Again, back to the community. We start with them. We go back to them to tell them what we've learned along the way. And only then do we sit down and actually write the plan and go through the adoption of a plan. So in the end, we have a plan that's been, not everybody agrees with everything that's in it, but at least we have consensus in the community and it becomes the community's plan. And this is ideally what we want when we do any plan and go through any process. And so I gave this presentation to neighborhood development, so I tried to highlight in each step what that department's role was in this. So I was debating, do I keep the words the same? And I decided to do that because it's neighborhood development, but it's neighborhoods too. It's what's the role here. And long-range planning is all about neighborhood and community. There's nothing in code that says you have to get community input. You could just write a plan and have it adopted. But buy-in is essential to the long-range planning process. You know, we would never be able to move forward if we didn't have the community pushing and supporting these ideas. And neighborhood development itself, you will hear from them when we're doing a planning process, your outreach specialists, where they help promote the meetings, input, feedback. They run the meetings. They even run some of the workshops during the meetings. They do asset mapping and things like that with us. But also really, they do that personal outreach to community members and civic league presidents and try to really bring them into the process, things like tonight, to bring people together. And perhaps even most importantly they help build capacity before we kick off a study. And a really good example of that is the Bruce's Park neighborhood in Broad Creek. We have a meeting Wednesday night to talk about the Broad Creek refresh. And Bruce's Park is an essential part of that, but neighborhood development has been instrumental in keeping contact and trying to help the leadership of that area have a voice, and we really rely on that as we go through the planning process. So I'll take a breath here, and we'll go into the second area of planning, zoning. And the public has a voice in zoning also. The biggest voice is in long-range planning. I have to say that the public has the loudest voice and the biggest voice and the most say, because with that in place, zoning follows. Zoning is a tool. It's the number one tool to implement our plans. It provides that foundation. So what you see here, this is a zoning map. Every piece of property in Norfolk has a zoning category, at least one. A lot of times they're layered on top of each other, and so there's multiple zoning classifications. And a lot of neighborhoods are very familiar with what they're zoned. So as I said, the zoning ordinance is really the key tool to implement the Plan Norfolk 2030. Zoning controls land use and development form, and it establishes the processes and procedures that have to be followed. And it is required by state code under the category of health, safety, and welfare. And I don't know that I even said that the comprehensive plan is also required by state code. You must have a comprehensive plan in Virginia. The zoning ordinance is more than just a map, though. It is a voluminous. It's, if we printed it out, it'd be about 3 inches thick, I'd say. It is huge. Fortunately, in this day and age, we have an interactive zoning mapper online, so none of us have it printed out. We use the online version and are able to jump around. But altogether, there are 41 base zoning districts, things like different types of residential, commercial, industrial, things like that. And then on top of that, there's overlays and special districts. So with all those different combinations and permutations in place, we really feel like we can put zoning in place that helps preserve the character of individual areas within the city of Norfolk. Zoning is not one size fits all. We would never say this area is zoned for multifamily and expect it to look the same across the entire city. Multifamily can be defined differently throughout the city, how it looks. And so the zoning ordinance, to have that flexibility, it prescribes a lot of different development standards. If you're going to, build something, it'll tell you how many parking spaces you have to have, the landscaping, open space, lighting, all those things are covered within the zoning ordinance and administered that way. There we go. So now, it feels like we're going to do a little shift, but I want to do a note because the City Planning Commission, let's say you're a civic league and you receive a notice in the mail or an email from somebody who says, I want to rezone, the 123 First Street, and I want to build, an apartment complex there, and you get a notice because they're going to rezone. Well, the rezoning notice will, our zoning staff will be working on it, but that will be considered at a public hearing before the City Planning Commission. So the City Planning Commission is a commission appointed by City Council. It has 7 members. They serve pretty long terms, but yes, they all have terms that they serve, and they have to be reappointed to stay on. And they meet twice a month. The public hearing is once a month, typically the 4th Thursday, but don't hold me to that in November and December because we don't meet on Thanksgiving or Christmas week, so it's usually on those 2, it's the 2nd Thursday. But they have an agenda that's published in advance, and it has all the items, whether it's rezonings or conditional use permits or things like that, and the Planning Commission conducts a public hearing. The public can come and speak for or against an item at the Planning Commission. However, we have other processes in place that the community should weigh in on an item before it gets to the Planning Commission, and we will cover that. Because waiting till a public hearing to voice opposition, while you'll still be heard, is always kind of a little late. You want to get out ahead of it. Another board that the public is involved in is the Architecture Review Board. That is also another board appointed by the City Council. They advise, well, first of all, they issue, it's called certificates of appropriateness for activities in historic districts. So in Ghent, downtown, and West Freemason, they issue certificates of appropriateness for replacement of windows, additions of porches, things like that in these historic districts. But even more importantly, when you get outside of the historic districts, is they review all city projects and give design guidance, and the Planning Commission will make the final decision on that. But they also review any development on property that the city or the housing authority sells to a private entity, except for single-family homes. They have their own process on the side. But and the public is allowed to weigh in on these aesthetic issues. It's purely how it looks, really, is what the Architecture Review Board comments on. And then we have the administrative reviews. We have reviews, plan reviews. When you go from a plan review the whole way to building permits, these are done internally in City Hall. Jim talked about this. These are administrative, and sometimes we've empowered the public so much through the planning process that even after they work their way through the Planning Commission, we get questions like, well, when are you going to come back out and show us their plans for the grading of the site and the drainage? And we're like, oh no, that's the engineers, that's their job. They will do that. They have their own codes they follow. At that point, it is no longer a public process. The public, of course, is entitled to see any of the information, and there's ways to do that, and we're trying to get more and more into the open data platform, but it is not a review process. There's no public hearing associated with their activities. Go. So I want to again touch base. We started with zoning and how it works its way through to being to getting a permit, but I really want to talk about neighborhood development's role and actually neighborhoods' role. This lovely fuzzy image, sorry about that, is from the Zoning Ordinance, and circled in red. Let's use an example of a 7-Eleven. A 7-Eleven wants to, they want to build a new 7-Eleven in Norfolk, and they're going to sell alcohol, they're going to be open after midnight, and they're going to sell gas. Well, that right there, oh, and cigarettes, that's 4. That would require 4 conditional use permits. So even if the zoning were correct and it's zoned, commercial appropriately for a 7-Eleven, they have to come in for 4 conditional use permits. So that will trigger a trip to the City Planning Commission and a public hearing. But before we can even deem that they have a complete application to schedule them, they have to have something called a pre-application neighborhood meeting. And so I really wanted to take this opportunity to say how important that meeting is. It's a really important meeting. When an applicant contacts us, 7-Eleven, a planner will work with them and say, you need 4 conditional use permits. Here's the application, look it over, talk to them about things. You're going to have your pre-application neighborhood meeting before we can even take your application from you. And at that time, we tell them what civic league they're located in. And at that point, they have a choice. The applicant can contact the civic league and schedule with the civic league to appear before their civic league. Now it's virtual, it used to be in person, and tell the civic league about what they're planning to apply for, field questions. Some civic leagues at that point will want to take a vote whether they support or oppose it. We don't require a vote. We just require documentation that they went to the meeting. We would want to hear from the civic leagues and how they feel about it, but we just need to know they went to the meeting. That doesn't always work. There's several instances that we have found over time and why that going to a civic league meeting doesn't work. Either in some areas there is no civic league. So how are we supposed to have that pre-application neighborhood meeting? Well, the applicant can host their own neighborhood meeting. We will give them mailing labels for people that properties are within a certain distance, and any civic leagues, if there is a civic league, and they have to mail and notify them and host a meeting. They have to take notes. They have to provide a sign-in sheet of who attended to us for that meeting. But I want to take a minute here to talk about this option of hosting their own meeting, because we have had instances where there is a civic league and they don't want that 7-Eleven, they just don't want it. And instead of scheduling the 7-Eleven, letting them come to the Civic League meeting, as, maybe the applicant tried first, they instead say, they stonewall them. Well, the applicant has a right to be heard, and so they host their own meeting. So Civic Leagues that try to, express displeasure or try to not allow an applicant to become complete by hosting them, we had to give them an option, and so they do host their own meetings. So the best thing a neighborhood group can do is to ask the applicants to come in to talk to them, because that, and a lot of times, can get a better product for the neighborhood, or the neighborhood just can express their displeasure and certainly speak at the public hearing later that they are opposed and give their reasons, and that is all fine. But really wanted to take a minute to talk about the importance of that neighborhood meeting, and that truly is the starting point for the input on when you have a zoning item. So we talked about it, and then the two options here, whether they can go to the formal neighborhood organization or they can host their own neighborhood meeting. And this link, maybe Jim can share the PowerPoint later, it's to an actual table in the zoning ordinance. It really summarizes all the processes and where applicants have to go, and it's quite useful. So I provide it here. I know you can't click on it, but maybe we can provide it to you later. The next area I want to touch on is environmental services. Again, they manage programs that also implement the comprehensive plan. And we have lots of goals in there about how we're going to take care of our dunes and get rid of the non-invasive plants, things like that. I mean, the invasive non-native plants, things like that. So a lot of what environmental is in the zoning ordinance, there's code, but there's other city code provisions that govern their work. They implement the requirements of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. We talked about erosion and sediment control, those orange fences, stormwater management programs, all very important and very important to development. And we have building safety is another area that they're the ones who ensure the buildings are constructed safely into code, something we all want. Talked about the counter, the development services counter on the first floor, which is now all virtual. They review construction plans and they issue the permits that you need to go forward. And then we have the inspectors who do the actual physical inspections of new construction and improvements and rehab, and they enforce the building code. So just to summarize before I take a sip of water and pause, really planning is a process. It covers a whole spectrum. It's always important to participate early and often in the process. The Plan Norfolk 2030 it captures the community's vision. That's really the opportunity to set the tone for where we want to go. And zoning and the other tools we talked about are there to help realize the vision. And so get involved early is my advice, and stay involved. And I just want to thank you for letting me ramble on here. And I think Jim is probably going to want us to, at this point, see if there's any questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see what we've got. All right.
Wonderful. Am I still garbled?
No, you're very clear to me.
Okay, good. Well, I'll leave my camera off so I don't get garbled again. I think we have a small enough group that I can unmute everybody if they have questions. I see we have one question already. A civic league, how can we be sure that what is presented by the applicant is what is actually being submitted to planning prior to submission of the application? that we hear. So everybody's okay. I'm going to unmute everybody. Your mute finger ready in the background, or you're arguing with your spouse. That way,
or your spouse comes in the room like mine. Yes.
Sure. So I'm going to unmute everybody right now, and just be prepared to mute yourself. But there's the first question, Paula. Okay. What should civic leagues? How can civic leagues be sure that what is presented is what is presented to the civic league is actually what will go to you and the Planning Commission?
It's a really good question, actually. And I can think of examples, and I'm sure the person who asked the question is familiar with examples where there have been bait and switches. A recent one, I won't throw anything. We have a planning commissioner who absolutely advocates for mixed-use development and everything, and he was present at a community meeting where the applicant said, answered his question, yes, we are going to provide space for commercial on the first floor, and adamant and said that, and happened to be he's a planning commissioner, so when it came before them, he remembered being told that, and he looked at it and said, where is commercial? So, firsthand can speak to that. So that's why it's important. It is important to communicate and back and forth and be specific in, if you support something, I would say be specific in the language, not just we support Mr. Brown's proposal. I would be, we support Mr. Brown's proposal for a 4-unit apartment building or something like that, so that everybody's clear that that's what you saw. And then the other way is to, check our agendas. I know lots of civic leagues do, but just to make sure, because we provide the applications early online, just to make sure what the application is matches what you were told as a civic league. And we try to catch that too. Our planners who do the staff reports typically reach out to the civic leagues or the presidents themselves too. Yeah. So I see where someone would like to ask a question.
One of the things that your colleague Susan Pollack mentioned to me once is she said or recommended that it would be good for civic leagues to have a designated person or committee. I think Gent does this, who monitors, the Planning Commission and is, educated themselves on zoning. That way they can catch some of those details in advance. I thought that was a good suggestion for civic leagues.
Absolutely.
Do I do chat?
Yeah. Can you get Jim? I can't see the questions and answers. If anybody else, I heard some typing, so I'm hoping somebody typed in a good question here.
Hey, hi Paula, this is Robin Thomas. Hi Jim. I don't need to. I can't seem to start my video, but that's okay. You don't need to see me. I'd like, if you can address the previous person's question would be fine, but just before we end, I'd like to talk a little bit about the conditional use permit process and how it affects restaurants and things in neighborhoods as well as downtown and urban areas. So just when we're through some of the neighborhood things, I'd just like to talk a little bit about that process if possible.
Right. Well, I don't, Jim, unless there's another question, I'll go ahead and answer yours, Robin.
Yes, I have a question, but I'll wait.
Okay. Well, let's talk about Robin's then, because neighborhoods are very interesting. Conditional use permits they're in place they're typically for uses that have some type of spillover effect on surrounding properties. So there's a reason that conditions might need to be put in place. They can, they might be appropriate here under these conditions, is why it's called a conditional use permit. So a good example is a restaurant, and I like to use Moe's as my pick on restaurant. Moe's in Ward's Corner several years ago when they opened. I swear, I think I've seen people drinking a beer in Moe's maybe once. I don't know, and they typically have, if they have a 6-pack, it's sitting on ice right there at the checkout, as I recall, of their beer. And they also close by 10 at night, I think. And we made them get a conditional use permit the same as we would make somebody get a conditional use permit if they were a nightclub for 400 people that were open till 2 in the morning and all those other things. And so with the new zoning ordinance, we tried to do a little logic, and we said, well, what is it? We tried to remove the conditional use requirement for restaurants specifically. If you are just a restaurant, meaning you don't have entertainment, you don't have bands and DJs and things like that, and you close by 11 p.m. in Ward's Corner, for example, and by midnight in downtown, you should be able to open without getting a conditional use permit. And we worked with the neighborhoods on that concept to get rid of the conditional use permit for that type of use. So,
Paula, I would say that was a great move, and you really listened to the small mom and pops and small businesses. Probably pertaining to that, as we know, I think even when you have that zoning application, there's still an application where you have to show a layout, but it's a modest fee, and it's approved administratively. I think there's still a requirement, maybe for those folks to show who the managers are going to be. I'm not certain about that. But the point I'd like to just talk a little bit about tonight is the folks that they're actually required to get a conditional use permit. I have, and I'll use an example right now. There's a new restaurant coming to 26th Street called the Kitchen Plate, and it's a very small chain. They started in Farmville, and they're going to take a fairly large space in one of Monument's new buildings there, or renovated buildings. And just to make sure they were on the right track, and we, of course, we went to the Park Place Civic League, as you were discussing, and we got their blessing. And of course, as part of the form, we need to talk about the operation, and we have to list the folks that are going to be the managers. And of course, it was good that he was out ahead of the process, but it was going to be more than 6 months before he was opened. And so it was, as Susan Pollack said, she said, you have to have managers. And so he's literally putting down himself and his son and his mother, and and it was just so he put something down, and he's still not going to be open for a while. So that's one little challenge. The other
I'm going to answer that one really quickly. Right. We have challenged ourselves with that very issue. We don't have a solution yet, but it drives us crazy.
Right.
Too. And we know it's not very business friendly. We have to find a way to do it better. We were going down a path where we were going to do it administratively. Don't think we're there yet, but we're working on it. Just on the managers, just change of managers,
right. Yeah,
not adding DJs and all that. Change of managers, right?
Yeah. So going back to the change of managers again. Now that that's sort of for even a new application. So now, of course, as we know, we've got many restaurants in Norfolk that have out-of-date managers, and I think. Right now, the process, it is a reduced fee. It's a fee of $350, I think. But my understanding is that they still have to go through the process. And as we know, part of that process sometimes is meeting, especially if they are extended hours, is meeting with the BAT folks just to, in part, learn how to handle a if something goes wrong, they're supposed to know, they're supposed to have their security people and just know what their responsibilities are. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, in a lot of restaurants now, we actually don't have up-to-date managers. And I was sort of, although the health department is a whole different state agency in a sense, I'm sort of equating it to, folks who want to go and work in a restaurant, they have to take a course with the health department. They've got to pay a fee. They've got to pass a test, and then they know how to, what not to do in a restaurant in terms of endangering people's health. It seems like somehow, even if it's just added on to the once a month BAT meeting that we have right now, that there could be an opportunity for new managers to come to a class that would educate them, because that part is still really important. And people could just get these things up to date. It's sort of a challenge as we go, as an architect, I go to work on people's applications, and of course the first thing we look at is out-of-date managers and who the managers are going to be. So it sounds like you're already working on it.
Well, I wrote a note to myself. I put, whatever happened to our proposal?
Yeah.
So I will follow up on that. Yeah.
I mean, it came up at the GET task force, and I think Klaus and Bob were involved in that, and there was some discussion about the fee, and it's good that the fee is reduced, but now we still sort of need to have the process on maybe a monthly basis, not a 6-weekly basis or something. Yeah. Anyway, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I think somebody else was next with a question.
Yes, it was me, Ms. Gaynor.
So how do you get ahead with the Planning Commission? Sorry, did I interrupt somebody?
Yes, I think somebody was asking a question. Yep.
Oh, go ahead. My apologies.
No, you can go ahead, Carl.
Go ahead. I was just reading some of the questions submitted.
That was my question I submitted was, how do you, quote, get ahead of something going before the Planning Commission? And also, this kind of just to point out an issue that we've had with as far as the Civic League and having someone come speak to us. Like, we'll have a Civic League meeting, and then I'll get the call the next day, hey, we need to come talk to you, and we don't have a meeting again for a whole another month. So how do you address, is there a way to address the timing issue?
Well, I'll start with the second half. Meeting once a month, that's good. I can't, we're not telling a Civic League they need to meet every 2 weeks or every week or on demand when an applicant calls. An applicant, it is, as much as they want to wish that we can move faster, it's not unreasonable. If they contact you on a Tuesday morning and you had your meeting the night before, again, the applicant does have the prerogative of holding their own meeting. They have to, I wish I had read the code. They have to give notice, though. They can't just contact people and say we're meeting in 5 hours or we're meeting tomorrow or we're meeting in 2 days. I believe they have to give a week's notice. So they do have that option. So as a Civic League, if somebody contacts you and they can't get on an agenda for 3 weeks and 6 days, for example, and they're going to host their own meeting, then tell them that they need to invite you. I am hoping applicants are willing to wait the 4 weeks and go before the Civic League, because as we all know, they're going to be asked by the Planning Commission. And at City Council, if a Civic League shows up at a public meeting, they're going to ask, did they come to the Civic League meeting? And the Civic League will say, no, they weren't willing to wait the 4 weeks to come to our meeting. And that doesn't always play well if there's a lot of issues. Yeah. So.
Actually, Paula, this is Robin again. Norfolk Air has been really great since you guys have added the Civic League contact numbers as well as when the meetings are. And so it's much easier these days for professionals or for anybody to just look on Norfolk Air under the property, find out when it is, and a little planning goes a long way in terms of getting out in front of those dates. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
I said we've learned the hard way with that. It's better just to look ahead.
Yeah. The questions will come up, and if somebody appears to have circumvented a process that's available to them, there'll be questions on it. And again, if it's just a 4-week wait, we will work with an applicant to get them in front of the Civic League. You know, for example, the deadline might be noon on a Tuesday, but they're going to that Civic. You know, the next Civic League meeting is a couple hours later on that same Tuesday. We will allow an applicant to come in the door, and as long as they go to the Civic League meeting that very night, we say, okay, it's a complete application, we're good. We try to be reasonable and know that, you know, people's livelihoods are dependent on this, but neighborhoods need to know. Yeah. So what was the first part of your question?
The first part of that was you suggested that we try to get ahead of something going before the Planning Commission. And could you give me any suggestions on that?
Well, the getting ahead part really was playing up that neighborhood that community meeting, that neighborhood meeting. Don't avoid it. Because the applicant will, if a neighborhood is avoiding having someone come as opposed to saying yes, please come, then they don't get an opportunity to hear about it earlier than the public hearing. And you can't stand up at a public hearing and ask an applicant, excuse me, how is trash collection going to work, or those kind of things, where if you host them at your Civic League meeting, then you can quiz them, get your answers, and in a lot of cases get some commitment out of the applicant, like, oh, well, we will never have the dumpster. Oh, the dumpster will, won't pick up on the weekends, or we'll make sure the dumpster is located on this side of the property, away from the houses, or you get a chance to have that discussion. Where at a public hearing, it gets late to have real meaningful input. So if you get contacted, please invite them in. Try to get, participate with them. Even if it is to recommend denial. I mean, even if it is you don't support them, I would hear them out first. Yeah.
Is there a Ms. Williams that had a question? I had a text, I think, from somebody that okay.
Okay. Hello. Yes, I have a question.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. How are you, Jim, and how are you, Paula? My name is Ms. Gaynor, and I have a few questions as far as the planning is concerned and how the decisions are made before they are made. And I noticed that you said about 150 people showed up at the city planning event, and there are over 220,000 residents in the city, and that's less than 1%. And so I just find it odd that a small number of people are able to make decisions for the majority of the city. And I wanted to know if you all could come up with a better plan of getting more input from more of the citizens throughout the city, if you have to hold more than one of those events, and also if you could also put more notices out, because most people don't know about the notices, or they don't know about these plans that are coming about until they have happened. My second question is, as far as...
Answer one at a time, my memory.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to tackle that one. So ultimately, I have to say, decision-making is done by city council, that are elected officials. There's no, they adopt the plans. They're the ones who ultimately vote on the rezonings, conditional use permits, all those things. That's at City Council. All the things I talk about before that is getting input. And you hit the nail on the head. We would love to have more people participate, any way, shape, or form we can get. And neighborhood development has been helping us with that, but it in a very odd way, COVID has helped a little bit because it has opened up our opportunities to invite people to participate in lots of different ways. We're filming more and posting it on the web for people to follow up. We are starting to do lots of online surveying. There was a Planning Commission item where we had over 400 responses about during COVID, should we loosen our restrictions on home occupations? Now, I know that's just a fraction, but it's a lot more than we've ever heard from before. So to back it up, during a comprehensive plan, when we had 150 participants, we had 3 meetings with them. We had one, we went back 3 times. So that was 150 per meeting. Could be the same 150 people, but we would love to have more participation. So I think even forums like we're doing tonight to talk about how important people's voices are in this process. And we want to find more ways to reach more people. But no decision is made until it goes to City Council. By our elected officials, they vote. Everything else just informs that. But you are correct. You are correct. We need more participation. So, yeah.
And Ms. Gaynor, we are open to any ideas that you have. If I could jump in with another suggestion, I had a conversation in a meeting with one of the planning commissioners, Nikita Houchins, back last fall. He was supposed to do a webinar for us that was later canceled on neighborhoods. But one of the things that he suggested, it's not required civic leagues take a vote, but he said one of the things that is important to him when they're making decisions is how many people voted on this. And so civic leagues, that's helpful information to the planning commissioners. Is this 5 people who voted on it, whether it's up or down, or how reflective is the civic league of the whole community? So I thought that was a good suggestion that, I think the planning commissioners are very interested in how representative the group is in the recommendations that they make. But also had another question.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. My other question is, more than 51% of the children come out of single-parent households in the city of Norfolk, okay? And I saw that there was a $2 million grant that was given actually for assist people with utilities, housing, and things of that nature. But my question is, there are a lot of people out there that have the opportunity to become business owners within their own city, because a lot of the people within the city of Norfolk that has businesses aren't from the city. And there are a lot of people that live here that would actually like to have businesses and become self-sufficient that are low income. But there are fees, there are all these fees, there are things like that. If a person can prove that they are low income, could you develop a program or a plan for those people to actually become self-sufficient for themselves? If you teach a person to fish, they will eat forever, but if you give them a fish, they will only eat for one night. And so I'm asking, this as a person myself who's, dealing with it, how can you come up with a program, or do you have a program that actually can be beneficial to low income, especially single mothers, to become self-sufficient and take care of their families and be able to sustain, because the city is really changing and there's going to be an income bracket very soon that some people will not be able to uphold. So how can we make sure those people will still be able to live in their communities and still build safe communities and be self-sufficient?
Great question. I love your passion. I absolutely do. The city, I am not an expert nor even all that well informed, I have to say, about all our programs we have and what programs we don't have. Our Department of Development and has a number of programs to help with that. But from the planning perspective, let's just keep it to planning for now, and let maybe a future meeting Jim can set up. We'll have development and maybe the St. Paul's office who are doing all kinds of things like this, with city money and grants. Maybe they can speak to it. But from a planning perspective, the example I gave about changing the requirements for home occupations, we loosened a lot of the requirements for home occupations, I'm going to say during COVID, but we defined the period up to December 31st of 2022 that these would be in place to allow for people in their own homes to, for example, do hairstyling, something we've never allowed before. There's still the health department hurdle, but so recognizing that in a COVID environment, people maybe want to isolate more and just see one customer at a time, and we have loosened up zoning to allow that, and we see it as a pilot to see, because we had a lot of neighborhoods who did not want to see this happen, but at least during this time period, we can see, is there a negative impact from doing that? So that is something that planning's done along the lines. Hairstyling may not be the best example because of the health department requirements, but somebody who does wedding planning, but they see customers at their house, that's a good example. Really low cost overhead to get started, especially if you can use your own kitchen table for your business and see customers. Prior to this, we didn't allow you to see any customers at your house. So little baby steps to try to lower the cost and the barriers to getting started in business, but maybe it's
okay. I am a chef myself, and the reason I'm asking that, it's really hard to find commercial kitchens in the area, and so if they could also do something as far as the zoning is concerned, as far as that is concerned, the kitchens as well, and also if they could provide an incubator space for that would be great.
Right. Now, the kitchen is another example. That is it's not the health department, it's the Department of, it's a state department that oversees that requires the commercial kitchen. Your own personal kitchen has to pass their inspection to be a chef out of your own home. And that's not zoning. We allow it from home. But you still have to.
Thank you for telling me that. I wasn't informed of this.
Yeah, you may, but we have a process in place, and
because I'm going through zoning at the moment, right now. So
going through zoning, we put it in touch with the state agency that oversees it, because there are requirements about if you have pets in the house, you have to have a door on your kitchen. It's stuff like that, Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, we do allow that. We allow that. And one way I have to say that businesses, especially startup, get people who are professional chefs, they can get a business license, and the prerequisite is that they prepare the food in their client's house. Therefore, you don't have to have the commercial kitchen requirement in place.
I got you.
Yeah. So we license those too. Yeah.
But that wouldn't work for catering, unfortunately.
No, it would not. No. You'd have to pass the equivalent of the health department's requirements. But working through zoning, yes. But we do allow it from the home. But it is stringent requirements on your kitchen. Yes. Yes.
Yes. As well as the fees, and that's why I asked about if there could be some type of program that helps with those fees before even getting your business.
Yeah. I'd be interested in hearing what development and the St. Paul's office, what they've been able to pull together. Did they have some grants and things for that? Yes.
Right. Yes, I have looked into it, but unfortunately, there are many, opportunities, especially for startup businesses.
Right.
So I have utilized, all the things I won a pitch competition that the city of Norfolk had. So I am utilizing some of the things that they have, but unfortunately, I still need a little help.
And Ms. Gaynor, those are great questions. Is there anything that would help get the word out about, notices?
Yes, there are several ways. that you can get the notices out. Many people watch television, the internet. You can put blasts on the internet. There are several ways that you can actually get to the people. Flyers, flyers inside of businesses, ask them if you could put them up in their businesses. There are many ways. And in the community, especially in the communities that's going to be affected, there should actually be well enough notice ahead of time to inform them, about that, any changes or any developments that's coming about.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. I know we have another question from Ms. Hazel. Have the outdoor dining expansion allowed due to COVID-19 also allowed for restaurants to provide outdoor entertainment or outdoor amplified music, even if that is not permitted in the original CUP ordinance?
Yeah, you are tied. No, you cannot add entertainment to the outdoors if you are not permitted to do it. And even, even the entertainment outdoors is somewhat limited, yes. But there are special event permits, and now I have no idea what the order from Friday did to anything. I have to say, the governor's new order on limiting 25 with events. We do event permits during this COVID environment too that, have allowed some outdoor entertainment, in places that, Larchmont neighborhood did it, and I think Colonial Place is doing it, and the Plot in Neon has hosted some outdoor events. There was a play put on out there, things like that. So we allow that, but to take and set up under a tent, a band, and things like that, on a nightly basis, no, we wouldn't allow that to start up if it's not already a permitted type of thing for outdoors.
Those are all the submitted questions. Are there any other questions hanging out there that we've missed?
It's Wendy Hazel again. Hi. Thank you for answering these questions, Paul. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi. I know we're familiar with each other.
Glad I didn't make a Highland Park example. Whew.
Right. So I guess my question or observation is that something has changed, that you're asking applicants to meet with us prior to them actually submitting the application. And I didn't know the purpose behind that. And I'm going to do 2 parts. And then it does seem like that it's become very onerous on the civic leagues to keep track of everything. We've got to watch the planning commission agendas. We've got to watch the city council agendas. We have to then look at the applications to make sure that they match up with what the applicants presented to us. So because civic league work is a labor of love, as we all know, and we want to do best for our neighborhoods. Is there a way that we can help this process so that it's better for everyone and maybe a little more easy to just keep track of?
Yeah, I'm jotting a note to myself because it is a good point, and it's been brought up a couple different ways. So yes, we have in the new zoning ordinance. So in March of 2018 is when that whole pre-application requirement became that you're going to have a community meeting before you have a final application, and that was put in place by the new zoning ordinance. It is part of the workflow. So I don't know that I've ever had a discussion or been part of a discussion of how that impacts civic leagues. And also the question we had earlier, which you have echoed too, is the need to follow to make sure that the application as it appears finally in front of the Planning Commission is what a civic league had considered much earlier. So I'm writing a note to myself to talk that over with staff. just to get us thinking about it. There's always ways to improve it. I personally don't have an idea right now. We knew it was important that the community consulted up front, though. There's nothing worse than having it all cooked and ready to go, and then you go and tell people, and then you ask people about it when there's nothing malleable left. It's like, oh no, it's already been designed, and we're 2 weeks from getting in front of our public hearing. No, we won't consider any changes at all. Where if we catch them earlier, they can look at, they might go from 8 units to 6 units, or they could consider different things. Wait a minute. The parking lot on that side. Maybe we can move the parking lot over to the east side, or something like that. So that is why we wanted to move it earlier. But yeah, the impact and the tracking, I get that.
No, and I appreciate the heads up, like to have applicants come to the Civic League prior to their application makes total sense. Like, just get a feel for what's going on. We think, that kind of transparency works for us. It works very well for us. But it would almost be nice if there was, like, they come before and then they come after with their actual application, and then that's what we were able to do a vote on. I think that would be, we get the heads up, and then we get here's the final product. What do you guys think, kind of thing. We've been through this a lot, as you know, Paula. We've been through this a lot. So.
Oh yeah. And you're not the only one to bring it up tonight.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we're the only ones dealing with it. Yeah.
And it came up at Planning Commission, where a planning commissioner had been at one of the earlier meetings and said, "Wait a minute, that's not what I saw." So I like that, adding a step. I hate adding steps, but I can see there's got to be a way where maybe we take the application when we deem the application as final, and at least we email it out at a very minimum. The planner emails it out, or the applicant emails it out. But yeah.
Super. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We can continue to take some questions, but if you're available, there should be open our evaluation. If you don't mind filling that out, I would appreciate it. Questions for future webinars. But back to questions. Have we covered everybody's questions? Well, Paula, you must have covered my questions, so thank you. Great job. I thought this was very informative, and I thought the questions were really good. They encourage me that our neighborhoods are engaging over these issues and concerned, and so that's a good sign.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I have some homework based on this. I will. These are good things to look at. I love relooking at our processes and seeing if we can improve them. So, thank you.
Thank you both.
All right.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you for hosting.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks, Paula. I'm going to leave the poll open for a few minutes, but I will stop the recording and close it out.